I'm Sheriff 𝙎𝙚𝙞𝙀🙗, and this is a special edition of Just the Facts. The Brooksville City Council is scheduled to discuss a very important issue at their next meeting, and that's going to occur on the evening of July 20th, 2026. They'll be talking about eliminating or amending the contract they have with the sheriff for enhanced law enforcement presence in the city. So I'm going to take the next half hour or so to explain that contract and what it means for those who live or work within the city limits. This is an important issue because it directly affects law enforcement visibility, response times, and service levels inside the city limits for both residents and visitors. Now, I'm speaking primarily to those who live or work in the city of Brooksville, but I also think it will be very informative for anyone who wants to better understand how law enforcement is deployed and funded in Hernando County. The City Council has a very difficult decision ahead of them. This is a conversation about taxes versus services, and I understand that this is a topic people feel strongly about on both sides. Every Brooksville citizen represented by the members of that city council has an opinion about the level of law enforcement service they want inside their city. And some of those opinions, frankly, they're very strong. Now, there has been some confusion and some misinformation about how this contract works. So my goal in this presentation is to focus on the facts as clearly and as honestly as I possibly can. I do not want a decision of this magnitude to be made in a vacuum and then later have residents upset because they didn't have the details they needed to form an educated opinion. That said, I know it's going to be difficult for us to anticipate every what if and yes but. If you have a question after watching this entire video that isn't addressed in the presentation, especially if it's regarding this contract, please go to our website, click the Contact Us menu item, and then select Send a Message to the Sheriff. Please be specific. It's going to be directed to the appropriate person, and I will be copied. Just make sure you leave your contact information so we can research your question and get back to you with the answer or follow up if we have any questions. Now, one more thing before we get started. I want to speak directly to every resident in Brooksville for a moment. Regardless of where you stand on this issue, whether you believe these enhanced services should be eliminated, reduced, kept the same, or even increased, I believe you deserve to know the facts so you can formulate an informed opinion and express that opinion professionally to your city leaders. Every decision an elected official makes regarding resources has consequences. It either means higher taxes or reduced services, and there's no way around that fact, and people feel strongly on both sides. Now, before I go any further, I also want to make one thing perfectly clear. Regardless of what the City Council decides, the Sheriff's Office will continue to serve the City of Brooksville as part of Hernando County. The real question today is not whether the city will receive law enforcement services. The question is what level of enhanced, dedicated service the city wants above the county-wide baseline. So let's focus on the facts. I'll be using some general dates and round numbers for the sake of brevity, but the graphics you'll see on screen will have more specific figures. Let's start with a little history. Prior to 2018, the city of Brooksville actually had its own police department. That department was disbanded in 2018. Now, at that time, the Brooksville Police Department's budget was about $2.6 million a year. When the police department was disbanded, the city at the same time contracted with the Hernando County Sheriff, they contracted with me, to provide enhanced law enforcement services inside the city limits. Now, here's what the original agreement looked like. The Sheriff's Office would provide 8 patrol deputies dedicated to the city of Brooksville. Now, that's enough to have 2 deputies on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, assuming that they never got sick, never took a vacation, never went to training, and never got hurt. Obviously, that's not realistic. So those positions were actually backfilled when a deputy was absent at no additional cost under the contract. Now, I'm going to come back to that point later. But the Sheriff's Office also agreed to rent the old Brooksville Police Department building. Now, this served 2 purposes. It helped provide additional law enforcement visibility inside the city, and it slightly reduced the cost to the city. All deputies assigned to work outside of Spring Hill, including those areas like Ridge Manor, Nobleton, Missourictown, and Royal Highlands, report to that location for their shift briefings. About 10 months ago, in September of 2025, the City Council determined that they could no longer afford the cost of 8 dedicated deputies, so they reduced the contract to 6 deputies. 6 deputies allows for 1 deputy to be on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a second deputy on duty 12 hours a day during the highest call volume times. Now, again, that's assuming there's no training time off or sick time. The cost for those 6 deputies in today's dollars is a little less than $1 million. So what does that cost really mean? Now, the only way we can determine value is through comparisons. You, for example, you can't determine the value of a house or a car unless you compare that house or car to other houses or other cars. And so one of the counties we regularly use to compare ourselves to is Charlotte County. They're about the same size as Hernando County, and they have a similar number of people in that county. They also have a city that has its own police department. It's the Punta Gorda Police Department. Now, speaking in round numbers for comparison purposes, the city of Punta Gorda has about twice as many people as Brooksville. In 2018, Punta Gorda's police budget was approximately $5.5 million, which is about twice what Brooksville's police department was at that same time. And of course, this stands to reason since their population is about twice that of Brooksville. Now, today, the Punta Gorda Police Department's budget is approximately $12 million. It's a little more than doubled since 2018. So, all else being equal, if the Brooksville Police Department was still in existence today, its budget would probably be somewhere around $5 to $6 million. The city of Brooksville is currently paying less than $1 million for those 6 dedicated deputies under this contract. Now, I have heard some people, when talking about government generally and law enforcement specifically, talking about those cost increases, they call it out of control spending. But before we jump to that conclusion, there are some very important facts to consider. Law enforcement particularly is a service, and in that way, it is not unlike the companies that provide your home health care, that clean your pool, or cut your lawn. And like those services, the biggest cost for us is our people. In most law enforcement agencies, and ours is no exception, about 82 to 85% of that budget is personnel costs. Things like salaries, health insurance, retirement, and benefits. Only about 15 to 17 cents out of every dollar actually goes towards purchasing things like patrol cars, patrol boats, firearms, ammunition, body armor, body-worn cameras, gasoline, computers, software, radar units, tires, paper, auto insurance, and everything else we have to spend to run a law enforcement agency. So what is actually driving the increases? Well, it's the same thing that's driving the increases in almost every service industry. It is the cost of people. Now, you may recall back in November of 2020, the citizens of Florida voted to increase the minimum wage from $8.65 an hour to top out at $15 an hour, and that's going to take full effect in a couple months. Now, for reference, the minimum wage back in 2018 was $8.25. So that's an increase since 2018 of almost 75%. Now, sometimes when I mention this, people will say to me, Sheriff, do you really have that many people working at minimum wage? Well, we do have some positions at or near the lower pay scale. The real problem is something we call pay compression. Now, let me take a minute to explain that. If you were being paid $15 an hour to clean dog kennels, as an example, in 2020, you're probably not going to continue doing that same job in 2026 for $15 an hour, especially when entry-level jobs everywhere else are now paying at least that amount. And the same principle applies across the entire pay scale. If a supervisory position or a job requiring specialized certification has historically paid more than an entry-level job, and the entry-level wages go up, but those higher-level wages don't, the people in those positions, they're going to leave. This is pay compression, and ignoring it will result in a mass exodus of experienced and professional people and an inability to hire qualified applicants. Now, what about law enforcement specifically? Regardless of how you feel about our governor, he has been very supportive of law enforcement. Starting pay for state law enforcement officers like FHP and FWC has gone from approximately $38,000 a year in 2018 to $62,400 this year. Now, that's an increase of about 64% since 2018. And metropolitan areas like Hillsborough County to our south, those state law enforcement officers receive an additional $5,000 per year on top of that starting salary. Now, county and city law enforcement agencies, they have to remain competitive with the state and with each other on those numbers, or we lose good people. And of course, none of this takes into account all the other inflationary pressures on the things we have to buy, like I mentioned earlier, gasoline, vehicles, equipment, and technology. It also, and this is an extremely important point, it does not take into account county or city growth. Now, here's an important point. The contract with the city of Brooksville on a per deputy basis has increased approximately 26% since 2018. 26%. Meanwhile, the minimum wage has increased nearly 75%, and state law enforcement starting pay has gone up 64%. The contract increase has been well below those benchmarks. And again, this does not take into account any growth. This is only inflation. I know one of the concerns many city residents have is what some people call double taxation. You pay county taxes and you pay city taxes, and I completely understand that concern. But the more accurate way to look at it is this. County taxes pay for the baseline law enforcement services that every resident in the county receives, and the city contract, it pays for enhanced dedicated patrol services inside Brooksville above that baseline. Now, here's an example that I think every person who owns a home can relate to. If you live in a rural area of the county, you pay county taxes. But if you live in a subdivision, you may also pay a homeowners association fee or a community development district tax, commonly called a CDD. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with a CDD, in simple terms, it's kind of a cross between an HOA and a small local government that actually covers that subdivision. A CDD has a board and can actually collect taxes through your regular property tax bill. And if you live in an area with an HOA or a CDD, you pay extra for community amenities like landscape entrances, subdivision walls, guard gates, security patrols, community centers, and many other services. Now, in that case, you're not being double taxed. You're paying for an enhanced level of service beyond what the county is willing and able to provide. Now, the same concept applies here. City residents pay county taxes for the baseline level of law enforcement that every resident in the county receives. The contract with the sheriff's office, it provides additional dedicated deputies on top of that baseline. So let's talk about what city residents already receive for the regular county taxes, because it's substantial. And when you look at this, you can put it into two major categories. The first, there is everything that is not patrol related. Second, there are those patrol related services. Let's start with everything outside of patrol because it's easier. Whether you live in Brooksville or anywhere else in Hernando County, your county taxes pay for the same access to things like the jail, courthouse security, property and evidence, the communications center, forensics, property crimes detectives, major case detectives, vice and narcotics detectives, internet crimes against children detectives, crime analysts, the records section, canine units, SWAT, aviation, the traffic unit, school resource deputies, the dive team, human resources, fiscal services, fleet maintenance, purchasing, and I could keep going, but I think you get the idea. And there is no difference in access to any of these services on where you live in the county. Now, let's talk about patrol specifically, which is what the contract is really all about. Patrol functions generally fall into two major categories: proactive patrol and response to calls for service. Now, proactive patrol, it's the time a deputy has available to do those things that are not driven by a citizen's call. Those are things like deterring crime by patrolling parks where juveniles congregate, being visible in neighborhoods in the middle of the night to help prevent car burglaries, conducting security checks on businesses, and conducting traffic enforcement. Now, speaking of traffic enforcement, that's a hot topic, so let's look at how much is done by city contract units versus county units inside the city limits. Now, if you look at this slide, you can see that county-funded patrol units are not leaving the proactive work entirely to the city-funded units. In fact, over half the traffic stops conducted inside the city limits were actually made by county-funded patrol cars. City residents are already getting proactive enforcement from their county tax dollars and additional proactive enforcement from the contract deputies. Now, here's what that means in practical terms. All else being equal, if there were no contract, there would have been at least 2,780 fewer traffic stops conducted inside the city limits in 2025. But all else is certainly not equal, and here's why. If there were no contract, those county-funded deputies who are currently making those proactive traffic stops in the city would instead be spending their time answering calls for service that are currently handled by the contract deputies. When a deputy is tied up on a call, that deputy is not available for traffic enforcement, business checks, or crime deterrence. Proactive patrol would decrease significantly. So what about visibility? Let's talk about that a little bit. The one city-funded deputy who is in the city 100% of the time, and the second city-funded deputy who is assigned to the city 50% of the time, obviously provides constant, dedicated visibility inside the city limits, whether they're on a call or not. But there's another factor many people don't think about. Because the sheriff's office rents the old Brooksville Police Department building and uses it as our District 1 office, every deputy assigned to work north of State Road 50, Cortez Boulevard, or east of the Suncoast Parkway, in other words, everything outside of Spring Hill proper, reports to that District 1 office building at the beginning of the shift. Now that means 3 times a day, the entire shift of deputies is traveling into and through the city to start their shift, and then traveling back out to their assigned zones when the briefing is done. Now that creates additional visibility in the city that people see every day, but they may not think about it. Now, if the contract were canceled, for example, we would move those shift briefings to the main sheriff's office building. Several of those deputies would no longer be traveling through the city to start their shifts. That additional visibility would be decreased or gone entirely. Now let's take a minute and talk about the second major patrol function, and that's answering calls for service. Specifically, how long does it actually take us to respond when a resident calls for help? More deputies means lower response times. Fewer deputies means longer response times. Now, that's not an opinion, that's basic math. As you can see from this chart, approximately half of the citizen-generated calls for service inside the city limits of Brooksville are already being answered by a county-funded patrol deputy. The other half are answered by the deputies paid for through the contract. And this does not include the times a city contract car is backed up by a county car, and I can tell you that happens very, very frequently. Remember that 50% of the time there's only one Brooksville contract car on duty, so it has to be backed up by a county car. And that means every single car that requires a backup is being backed up by a county patrol car. And when there are 2 Brooksville contract cars on duty, it's not unusual for both of them to be tied up on assigned calls, which means 1, 2 or more county cars are providing backup to those calls as well. So what does this having 1 or 2 dedicated cars in the city at all times actually do for response times? As you can see, the average response times inside the city are noticeably better than the surrounding county zones. It's important to note that as the population of Florida, Hernando County, and the city of Brooksville continues to grow, traffic will increase. And response times will, all else being equal, get slower, not faster. Additional deputies help offset that trend. Removing deputies accelerates it. So, what happens if the city leaders of Brooksville decides to make any changes to or completely discontinue the contract with the sheriff? The level of service, it's got to change. There's no way around that. The 2 current city zones, which are currently handled by 1 deputy half the time and 2 deputies the other half, would be absorbed into the larger surrounding county zones. Now, here's a map that shows our current zone structure, including the dedicated Brooksville zones. This means that if the contract is eliminated, the deputy assigned to Zone 1-4, as an example, would also have to take the responsibility for all calls north and west of Broad Street, which is also known as 41, from the downtown area. The deputy assigned to Zone 1-5 would have to absorb the calls in the center and northeast part of the city, and the deputy assigned to Zone 3-3 would have to pick up everything south of the truck bypass and east of Broad Street, or 41. And lastly, the deputy assigned to Zone 3-1 would have to take responsibility for the area west of Broad Street and north of the truck bypass. These county zones, as you can see, are already large. You can look at the number of square miles both before and after the change if the contract is eliminated. The deputies assigned to them, I can tell you they're already busy. And all else being equal, those deputies will not be able to spend a lot of free time inside the city. Both proactive patrol and response times in the city will be impacted. The level of service in the city would become roughly the same as the level in the surrounding county. And the county zones adjacent to the city would also be impacted by absorbing the additional workload. And that's the workload that's currently handled by the contract deputies. Now, here's what the new zone map would look like if the city decided to cancel the contract with the sheriff's office. We do our best at the sheriff's office to make decisions on resource deployment based on data and not emotions. There is certainly a cost to providing that enhanced law enforcement to the residents of Brooksville, just like there's a cost for people who live in an area with a homeowners association or a CDD. And I can certainly understand the concern about budgets. So how much does this enhanced law enforcement service actually cost each citizen? Well, it works out to about $8.30 per person per month. That's about 28 cents a day for each person who actually lives inside the city of Brooksville. For that, you get dedicated deputies in your city, faster response times, additional proactive patrol, additional traffic enforcement, and additional visibility, on top of everything your county taxes already provide. The residents of Brooksville and the city council will have to decide if that extra visibility and those faster response times are actually worth the expense to them. Ultimately, this is a decision for the residents of Brooksville and their elected members of the city council. My responsibility is not to make that decision for you. My responsibility is to make sure that you have accurate information about what the contract provides, what it costs, and what changes will occur if it's reduced or eliminated. In closing, if you have a question that wasn't addressed in this video regarding the City of Brooksville contract with the Sheriff's Office, please visit our website at www.hernandosheriff.org. Go to the Contact Us menu item and select Send a Message to the Sheriff. Thank you for your time. I know this is a critically important issue for the residents of the City of Brooksville and the City Council members, and I respect every opinion on it. I just want to make sure those opinions are based on facts, Now, if you know somebody, a friend or relative who lives or works inside the city of Brooksville, please do us a favor, share this video with them. If you're watching this on Facebook, you can share it a couple different ways. You can go ahead and click the share button and send it to them in a private message. You can share it on your timeline, or you can even go into the comments and you can type the @ symbol and type their name. And if they have a Facebook account, they'll be tagged in it. If you're watching this on YouTube, again, you can hit the share button and you can copy the link. You can even email that to people who may not have social media so they can get all the information about what potentially may happen in the city of Brooksville over the coming months and years. As always, we appreciate your support of law enforcement. We never, ever take it for granted. Please stay safe, Hernando County.